Hi, this is Stephanie Lotvin of Tellybean Knits, and today I'm going to show you how I weave in the ends on a stranded colorwork project. I get asked how I weave in ends so frequently, and the thing is it really depends on the project. I think that every project is a little bit of a puzzle for how I'm going to weave in ends. I certainly have techniques that I use again and again, especially in projects that are not stranded colorwork, but I also think with stranded colorwork projects, it can really depend on the motif that you've worked on the right side of your work as to how you're going to deal with the strands on the wrong side of your work. So I have here, you can see, there are quite long floats for the wrong side of this work, and there is no wrong way to weave in an end if it is secure, in my opinion. If you have rules for how you like to work your ends, then you should know I think rules are for other people. I like to really just go on the adventure and make sure that my ends are secure. It's the wrong side of my work. So all I care about is that you can't see it on the right side of your work and it stays in place. All right, so I have my yarn on a tapestry needle, and I've chosen quite a sharp tapestry needle for this project. And one thing I like to do when I'm weaving in the ends for a stranded colorwork project is on that first stitch, I just like to give that a gentle tug to make sure that that stitch is the right size before I start weaving in ends. Sometimes when you're working in stranded colorwork, that first stitch where you joined your yarn can be quite large, or it can be quite tight depending on what has been happening in your project bag while you have been working with your yarn. And so I just like to, before I start doing anything that has to do with weaving in ends, while this is on my tapestry needle, just make sure that the tension looks like it matches the rest of the stitches in that very first stitch. And then turn that back to the wrong side. Okay, so one of the things that I really like to do is I like to split my floats in order to weave in my ends. So this is a really simple way of weaving in ends for stranded colorwork and works particularly well for me when there are lots and lots of ends to weave in. So for this project, what I'm going to do is I'm going to split the floats using the tip of my tapestry needle at a diagonal. So like this. So I'm actually choosing floats in both colors. So I'm splitting a little bit of a purple float, got a tiny orange float there. It's a tiny purple float. Here's a longer orange float. Try not to span gaps too large. Here's an orange float. Here's a purple float. And you can see I've come at a diagonal and I've just split those floats on the wrong side of my work. And I'm just going to pull my tapestry needle through so you can see that my tapestry needle helped me capture a little bit of each of those floats. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing coming back with one extra step, which is to lock that strand in place. So I'm going to come back in this direction and I'm going to split floats on the wrong side of my work. And then I'm actually going to cross over. So you can see this is part of my tail where I came at a diagonal. I'm going to split that also as one of the floats on the back of my work that I catch. And by splitting this, the tail that came up at one diagonal, I'm helping to lock this yarn in place. So it has a harder time coming back out later if there's a lot of pull on it. My hats get a lot of wear and a lot of love from both me and my children. And so because there's so much tough love for this future hat, I can see it in this hat's future. I know that all of the ends need to be locked in tight. Also, I'm using a superwash yarn, which is slipperier than a non-superwash. So I do go to some extra lengths to make sure that my ends are in place. I'm just going to continue to split some of those floats, and the length that I'm going at a diagonal is a little over an inch. So I come up a little over an inch and then I come back a little over an inch. And when I come back on that second diagonal, I just split the tail. And then I pull that through. And then I like to give it a little like gentle tug to make sure that it's not too tight. And I can look along that edge and see if I'm feeling like it's still feeling loose. I think it's looking pretty good. I'm going to cut this tail, and I'm leaving quite a long tail. This is probably an inch, 2.5 centimeters, and I'm gonna fray this with the tip of my tapestry needle. And the reason I'm doing this is that makes it harder for it to pull completely back through. I might decide to be aggressive during my blocking, but also I know that inside a little bit of extra fringe inside of a hat isn't going to hurt anything. Eventually this will felt itself down. Even in a superwash, I find that these tend to felt themselves down, especially if they're being pushed against hair. And this means that that end is much less likely to pop through to the front somehow, or for my end to come back out when my kids are wearing it and pulling it onto their heads. I'm going to show you another hat where I need to weave in ends that looks a little different. And as I mentioned before, weaving in ends on a stranded colorwork project, it really just depends on the motif. And so you might weave in ends one way with your stranded colorwork project and then get to another portion and weave them in another way. Just prepare yourself to go on an adventure. Okay. I have here, I'm working with some white. You can see this stitch is loose. So I'm just gonna flip this back out. Oh yeah, you can see on the right side that that is loose. So I'm gonna just carefully pull that into place. Make sure the tension looks okay on it. There, that's better. And then flip that back to the wrong side. Now, this is a little different. I do have floats, long floats that are coming around here, but I have some obvious stitches that I can follow right here at the top of this motif. And when that is possible, I like to do that first. So I will actually take my tapestry needle and I'll follow the stitches and essentially duplicate the stitches in the same color as the tail that I'm working on to help lock that little bit of weaving into place. So I'm just following along the same stitches in the same color. And now it's quite a short row, but you can see I've worked a duplicate stitch with, essentially worked duplicate stitch on the wrong side, on the wrong side with this tail. And now I'm going to work along the bottom edge of those duplicated stitches and just split those stitches in the tail with my tapestry needle. So I'm being careful not to have that show through on the right side of my work. You can see, you can't see the needle on the right side of the work. So it's always good to check if you can see any shininess on the right side of your work before you pull the yarn tight. So I'll just pull the yarn tight. And then this is the top edge of where I duplicated those stitches. Now I'm going to split those stitches and the tail. I'm doing that together to just reinforce that. And then pull that through. Now, I could stop right there. That's probably plenty, but I'm not going to because I have it on my tapestry needle, so I might as well make sure it's secure. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to do the same thing that I did at the beginning. I'm just going to split about an inch worth of floats at a diagonal, come back, split them again, cross the tail portion, split it, and then finish. So I'm just going to catch some of the floats on the wrong side of my work. And you can see I'm splitting the floats that are not the same color as my white yarn, but that's okay because they do not show on the right side of my work. The floats are only on the wrong side of the work. I'm being careful not to split any of the stitches that might show through to the right side of my work. So I'm just coming at a diagonal. I've split the floats, and then now I'm going to come back. I'm going to cross over my tail split the rest of those floats and then come back. And then I've woven in that end. I'm going to go ahead and cut the yarn and then fray that little tail that I left. And then I'll flip that to the right side. Make sure I'm showing you the spot where I just wove in. And you can see this is where I just wove in those stitches, and you can't see any of the woven in stitches. And that is how I weave in ends when I'm working in stranded colorwork. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Thank you so much for watching.